So I actually saw this really interesting video from Floyd Mayweather. Obviously, he's the undefeated boxer. He's not the GOAT of boxing because he very strategically chose his fights to make sure that he would win, like waiting too long for Pacquiao to fight until it was too late for it to be like a really good match. So it's like, Ali and those guys are obviously better than him. But he's, definitely the richest boxer for sure. His current net worth is somewhere around like 500 million is the estimates. He gets like tens of millions for fights against like Logan Paul and all these other different fights, and so he's incredibly rich. I think in the video, I think I don't know if that's a Richard Mille or not, but I don't know. It's probably like $1 million. Anyways, so he in this video he's going to explain that for him his first 100,000 check felt better than the $100 million check, and this is going to come from the guy. I don't know if it's Gillie or Wallo, but he's asking the question of like, what was the feeling of that first $100 million check? And it seems like he's presuming that that first 100 million check must have been like really, really crazy feeling. And basically, what Floyd's gonna say is, I guess he didn't really feel much from it, and he much felt better from the 100K check. So check it out.
Best feeling I ever had was when I got $100,000. And when you come from nothing, from poverty, from nothing, and then you get $100,000 check, because $100,000 at that particular time felt like 100 million. But once you done received $100 million check and $50 million check on a regular, then it's just...
No, but what I'm saying, when you received that first one, because see, nobody had done that type of shit before.
The $100,000 felt better than 100 million. Because that was my first check.
So what you can see from Floyd is really interesting, obviously. And so there's this conversation about money, and everybody in the United States, I feel like all they're doing is just trying to make money. I feel like other countries don't do this, don't have this kind of culture. Any other modern developed nation, like, you look at like European countries like a Germany or a Spain or UK or any of those, it's not just about money. When I was saying a lot of those countries, it's more just like, you work to live kind of thing instead of living to work, which is kind of what you do in the United States. And so it's a culture of just extremism towards money, and everything is about money, and you just stack dollars on dollars, and that's just what happiness is. But for him, basically what he's saying is after that first 100K check, everything from there was kind of either numb or it just didn't give the same high as that first $100,000 check. And so something important to understand, there's this debate about, well, can money buy happiness, right? That's the question. And so in, I think, 2010, there was a study that said that it basically capped out at $75,000. So that was 12 years ago. So stuff is going to get more expensive, obviously, as time has gone on. But there's a new study, I guess, that's out. But basically, this article asks a question about, what the perfect salary is. And so it's a little bit, the information is a little bit more nuanced, but it also kind of really isn't. But it basically said that, people felt happier until 75K, and then it just kind of leveled off. And so essentially what that means is if you have enough money to live comfortably, you make enough money to be able to not only afford your basic expenses, but also maybe be able to take a vacation or, be able to buy certain things and items and goods, comfortably, extra goods and items that you can use and stuff like that. That's essentially the spot. So in other countries, that's kind of just what's expected. But in the United States, it's more kind of just stacking dollars on dollars. And so a bunch of rich people say that basically money doesn't buy happiness. And so essentially what the studies and data say is that money does buy happiness up to a certain point. So it comes down to semantics. But essentially once you start making around 95, 60 to 95,000, that's where money does buy happiness. But your happiness level between making 95 and like 250, you're probably not going to see much of a jump, because at that point you're just going to have enough, you'll have more money, but the stuff that you buy isn't really going to give you much happiness as compared to 95, where you can still comfortably live. So essentially the other nuance of this also is people live in different areas with different expenses. So for example, if you live in the Bay Area, like making 100K may or may not really be able to be very much for you because it's much more expensive. But if you live in like Nebraska or Iowa or even like Ohio or something like that. Like that's a good amount of money, right? So I think the nuance of it, even more than just a one set, like, average. I don't know if it's a mean that they're looking at here. Mean are terrible. But it's just whatever is comfortable life enough to comfortably not only pay for your basic necessities, food, water, housing, etc., but also be able to have some extra money left over to spend on just extra things, right? So it says, but more recently, a 2018 study from Purdue University used much wider data from the Gallup World Poll and found that the ideal income point for individuals is $95,000 for life satisfaction and $60,000 to $75,000 for emotional well-being. When people earned more than $105,000, their happiness levels decreased. It says, but even a decade later, experts say that the amount of money people need for happiness would still be around the median income for U.S. residents, which is $63,000. So it says the idea is that you need money to meet basic needs such as access to healthcare and a safe place to live. Leo Bomirsky says if you grow up without resources like food, clothing, or shelter, then having more money really makes a huge difference in your life and overall well-being. But once you hit that middle class level, there really is no correlation above that, says Brad Klontz, a financial therapist, psychology professor at Creighton University. This can be challenging to comprehend because most people operate under the assumption that money will solve all of our problems. At the end of the day, we're humans and we struggle with existential issues like what's the meaning of life and who am I, Klontz says. And those sort of questions don't go away when you get a bunch of money. It says purpose is more important than money to be happy. So, you can buy yourself happiness up to a certain point, essentially. So I guess spending money on things like experiences and stuff like that as well. And so really the truth about life in terms of happiness, I think, is just, I would say, having enough money to comfortably be able to support yourself, pay your mortgage, all that stuff, for your basic necessities. Also, to be able to have enough money to be able to comfortably purchase some things like maybe like a TV, or a game system or food and, eat or go on a vacation, stuff like that, right? That once you're at that point, again, your best thing to do is to build relationships with people, friendships, having a partner, and then living experiences. That's really it. And so when you really think about what happiness is, again, you can buy happiness up to a point. So if you are poor and you can't afford those things, that is going to make your life considerably better. Going from 30K a year or 5K a year or 0K a year to 95 is significantly going to improve your happiness. That is absolutely certain. But if you go from, that 95 to 350 or maybe 350 million in net worth, it's not going to make you more happy. And so what we should focus on as a nation is, and it's fine to have rich people. That's completely fine, right? Millionaires, and even what Floyd Mayweather does, like the stuff that Floyd Mayweather does versus what like a Jeff Bezos does are very different, because Jeff Bezos is like, he's the owner of a bunch of Amazon stock, and his workers work in factories that they don't own and all of that kind of stuff. And so there's that whole thing. But Floyd Mayweather is actually out there, like he's doing boxing matches. People are paying to watch him. So it's much different, I think, for like basketball players and stuff like that who really work their ass off for their money in that way directly. Whereas in the other realm, it's like, obviously they brought some value to creating the product, but at the same time, the workers have a lot of value in what they're doing and what they're creating. And so is it fair for them not to have any ownership, right? That's the question. I don't think that question really necessarily exists with, something like a Floyd Mayweather and stuff like that. So having rich people is fine, but generally speaking, the culture should be towards just getting to that comfort point of 95K or whatever it is that is comfortable in your area, because different areas are going to have different, in some areas you may only need 50 or 60K to live comfortably. In a lot of areas, that's the way it's going to be. So just getting enough money to live comfortably, and then again, going back to, what is the human being's purpose? It all just goes back to evolution. That's it. And so when you think about it, human beings are just wired in terms of evolution. So, Darwinian evolution is obviously just surviving to reproduce. So, We know that things like being social and having friends and communicating and socializing is going to be something that's going to bring you happiness. I guess, that's something that's deep rooted in us to bring happiness, because I think it would increase your survival levels by being able to talk to people and build connections and stuff like that. And so, because that increased our chances of living, it made it so that we enjoy that kind of stuff. We want to do that kind of stuff. So building relationships, having experiences, stuff like that. But if you're only making 5K a year or 30K a year, and to live comfortably you need like 60 or 90 or 100, it's obviously going to be it's going to be a very shitty time, and it's going to be very difficult. So that's kind of where we should get to, I think, as a society as a whole. And I'd like to see the mentality of people, instead of everybody being temporary um, people who are not making as much as Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. How about that's not the goal? You don't want to be the next Bill Gates or the Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. You just want to enjoy your life and find passions. You can even find like passions in work. Maybe you're super into photography or politics or making videos and all this stuff. There's no, you can do those kinds of passions. You can even still make money from them. You can still make money from the passions without it turning you into just like some greedy sleazebag. You know what I mean? So that's essentially what it comes down to, I would say. But it's definitely an important conversation to have. And you can see from Floyd Mayweather, whether you hear from, J. Cole or whatever, but money is not going to buy happiness after that 90K level. You're not going to be happier making 300 than making 90, assuming 90 is enough to live comfortably wherever you are. It's just not. But maybe making that 90 and then building up 2 to 3 really close friendships, or finding a partner to live your life with, those are things that are going to make your life feel more worthwhile. Or maybe finding a passion or a sport that you really like playing, or an activity you really like doing. That's going to make your life more meaningful, and you're going to enjoy it. Money is not the answer to happiness unlimitedly. Money is the answer to happiness if you're not living comfortably, and this is what the rest of the modern world has figured out already. So we're lagging behind. But by selling this lie to Americans of the fake American dream that you'll be the next Jeff Bezos or whatever, you're not going to be that person. You shouldn't want to be that person, because that's actually shitty. And we know that with the Gini coefficient, that actually that level of wealth inequality that exists in the United States is actually too much. It's actually bad. Causes property crime. People don't have enough money to purchase those goods. So, it's just something that's really important, and we need to talk about it. And we need to alter the way that we look at things. We should work to live instead of living to work. Another thing that I actually wanted to add was, I actually think that there's like this fetishization of coming out of poverty, where you go through this really, really horrible, impoverished time, and then once you start to get enough money to live comfortably, or maybe you're the one who ends up, becoming the next Jeff Bezos, your mentality is, I came from nothing, and so you should go through the same horrible, shitty experience that I went through. And it's almost like kind of like a radicalization, traumatic kind of thing. But just because somebody went through, or you went through, going through poverty just to be able to afford healthcare bills, doesn't mean that we shouldn't change the system so that or the culture even, where that's not something that should be the goal. We should make it so that people's basic necessities are met. And then far beyond that, it's essentially your choice. You should be able to live comfortably within reasonable means. But above that, you can go for that if you want to or not. And so just because you went through that doesn't mean that other people should also have to go through the horrible experience that you went through. We should change the system so that everything isn't about having to go through that. And so it's a weird combination of it's a way to keep other people down, obviously, especially if you make it out of being broke, then you can keep other people being broke and then you making more money. So it's like a weird kind of traumatic response, as well as a fetishization of, again, the fake American dream kind of thing. So that's also another thing that I really do think needs to change. It shouldn't be because you got out of poverty, everybody else who's in poverty should also have to go through that horrible experience. We should make it so that horrible experience isn't a necessity or doesn't exist anymore.